In tonight's headlines, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will be sworn into office at around midnight Hong Kong time and vows to sign a record number of executive actions on day one. One more Hong Kong resident who has been illegally detained in Myanmar for 4 months is rescued. And problematic land ownership will be addressed by a proposed title register system under an amendment bill of the Land Titles Ordinance. The United States President-elect Donald Trump is poised to take office at around midnight Hong Kong time, marking the beginning of his second presidency. The inauguration day will feature a series of events, including a procession to the Capitol, swearing-in ceremonies, a signing ceremony, and Trump's inaugural address. The day will also see the departure of the outgoing President Joe Biden, a luncheon, and a military review. All events would be held indoors due to chilly weather conditions. Speaking at a rally before the inauguration in Washington, D.C., Trump said he will sign a record number of executive actions on his first day back in office.
Tomorrow you're going to see executive orders that are going to make you extremely happy. Lots of them. Lots of them. We have to set our country on the proper course. By the time the sun sets tomorrow evening,
these are anticipated to include measures for large-scale rapid deportations of illegal immigrants, enhanced border security, restrictions on transgender participation in women's sports, and policies addressing issues in the Middle East. Earlier, the president-elect, along with incoming Vice President J.D. Vance, visited Arlington National Cemetery to lay wreaths at the tomb of the unknown soldier and honor the soldiers who lost their lives in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Meanwhile, Biden bid farewell on his last day in office to the people of South Carolina, the state that marked the beginning of his victory in the 2020 election. He reflected on how his public service career has been influenced by civil rights leader Martin Luther King and the late President John Kennedy. Biden stated that serving as president has been the honor of his life and urged the public to believe that better days are ahead. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News.
One more Hong Kong resident who had been illegally confined in Myanmar has been rescued and is now safe in Thailand. According to former District Councillor Andy Yu, who has been assisting the families of several victims of Southeast Asia-related scams. Yu later told reporters that the rescued individual was detained for around 4 months, and the affected family reported they did not pay a ransom. So far, Yu has received a total of 8 requests for assistance in saving Hong Kongers lured to Southeast Asian countries, with 2 victims successfully saved.
The families of some Hong Kongers believed to have been lured and imprisoned in Southeast Asia submitted a petition to the Myanmar consulate, urging the Myanmar government to assist in their safe return. The petition included information about several individuals currently held captive against their will. No consular staff were present to receive the letter, which was ultimately left at the door. The representative of the victims' families expressed his deep concern, stating that his relative had reported going to Japan for a purchasing job about 6 months ago, but instead ended up in Thailand and was later transferred to Myanmar. He noted that the relative used to communicate with the family once or twice a week. However, contact was lost approximately 3 to 4 weeks ago after a brief call in which the relative mentioned a possible transfer to another location. So far, the families have not received any ransom demands, and there have been no new developments from the Hong Kong government regarding the case. Former District Councillor Andy Yu, who is assisting the affected families, noted that if the victims have been moved to another location, it complicates the situation, necessitating updates to the information previously submitted to the authorities. He urged both the Hong Kong and local governments in Southeast Asia to take swift action to prevent the situation from worsening. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News.
The Development Bureau is set to introduce a title registration system for newly granted land in Hong Kong, aiming to enhance property ownership clarity and reduce transaction costs. The proposed legislation will be submitted to the Legislative Council in March, with implementation expected in the first half of 2027. Under this new system, individuals registered as owners will be recognized as legitimate proprietors of the land, thus minimizing disputes over property rights. This shift from the current registration of deeds, which has been in place since 1844, will eliminate the need for buyers' lawyers to conduct exhaustive checks on historical ownership documents during property transfers, significantly streamlining the process. The government also highlighted that the new system will serve to prevent issues related to adverse possession claims, where individuals can claim ownership of land through continuous occupation without the owner's consent. Although the Land Titles Ordinance was passed in 2004, it has remained unimplemented for the past 2 decades. Following a review, authorities have opted to eliminate the mandatory correction principle. This change ensures that sincere and uninformed buyers who have paid a fair price and possess the property will maintain unassailable ownership, even if fraud was involved in the property's transfer. The new system will initially apply only to new land grants, allowing for a phased implementation that avoids disrupting existing property transactions, according to the government. Quentin Yap, Cable News.
Mainland authorities have carried out the death penalty for the driver responsible for a tragic incident in Zhuhai that resulted in the deaths of 35 people. Back in November last year, 62-year-old Fan Wei-Chiu drove a small SUV into Zhuhai Sports Center, deliberately crashing into the crowd inside the venue. The horrific act left 35 dead and 43 injured, with Fan being apprehended at the scene. Last month, the Zhuhai Intermediate People's Court sentenced Fan to death for endangering public safety through dangerous methods. The execution was conducted today under the supervision of court officials.
TikTok is up and running again in the U.S. following a brief shutdown after assurance from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump that he will sign an executive order to extend the deadline for the China-based company to sell the app on its first day in office.
And as of today, TikTok is back. Frankly, we have no choice. We have to save it. A lot of jobs. We don't want to give our business to China. We don't want to give our business to other people.
Trump, speaking at a rally before his inauguration, also assured that service providers of TikTok will not face penalties. The short-lived 12-hour hiatus ended after a message was sent to users stating that the app was back as a result of President Trump's efforts. Over 170 million TikTokers in the U.S. can now access posts on both the app and website, with functions returning to normal. In a statement, TikTok mentioned that they are working on restoring service in agreement with their service providers. The company also emphasized their commitment to collaborating with the incoming president for a long-term solution that ensures the app's operation in the U.S. The owner of the short video sharing app ByteDance voluntarily ceased its U.S. services just hours before the divestment or ban deadline on Sunday. Service providers, including Apple and Google, also removed the app from their platforms. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
Families and friends of both Israeli and Palestinian captives burst into tears of joy and relief after anxiously waiting for 15 months, as 3 Israeli hostages have been released by Hamas and dozens Palestinian prisoners walked free from Israeli jail as part of a ceasefire hostage deal that took hold Sunday. Buses carrying 90 freed Palestinians out of Ofer prison in the West Bank were greeted by large crowds cheering and waving flags. They are expected to return to what was left of their war-ravaged homes, reuniting with families and, in many cases, burying their loved ones. Meanwhile, 3 Israeli hostages, including 24-year-old Rami Gonen, who was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, have returned home safely, all in stable condition. However, this joy is overshadowed by concerns for nearly 100 others still held captive by Hamas since the October 7th attack in 2023. A Hamas spokesperson said that further exchanges would occur according to an agreed timeline, but warned that any violation of the ceasefire could jeopardize the hostages' safety. Meanwhile, as fragile calm returns to Gaza, hundreds of aid trucks have entered the enclave, offering a glimmer of hope amid a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. But the future beyond the initial 42-day phase of the deal remains uncertain, though there are plans for more releases and a permanent end to hostilities. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, under pressure from both the outgoing Biden administration and incoming Trump administration in the United States to secure a deal before the latter's inauguration, stated he received assurances from Trump that Israel could continue its military actions against Hamas if necessary. Quentin Yap, Cable News.
Employment conditions in the city have remained steady, with the latest jobless rate unchanged at 3.1%. From October to December last year, the number of unemployed individuals dropped by approximately 6,100, bringing the total to under 114,000. The underemployment rate held steady at 1.1%, with an increase in numbers of around 1,800 people. The total employment rose by about 7,100. Labor and Welfare Secretary Chris Sun noted that the unemployment rate has decreased in several industries, with significant declines observed in sectors such as manufacturing and finance. He expects the labor market to remain broadly stable in the short term.
2024 has been a record-breaking year for Invest Hong Kong, which attracted 539 overseas and mainland companies to set up or expand their business in the city, a 41% jump from the previous year. Over 6,000 jobs were expected to be created during their first year in the city, generating over $67.7 billion in investments. Mainland firms led the influx of 273 companies, followed by companies from the United States, France, the United Kingdom, and Singapore. Invest Hong Kong's Director General Alpha Lau noted a surge in French companies in the engineering and infrastructure business, mainly attracted by the northern metropolis. Separately, with incoming U.S. President Donald Trump set to begin his second term in office, she remained confident that American firms will keep coming to Hong Kong.
Now, of course, there are still uncertainties about the overall global geopolitical situation, and it remains to be seen what would the new administration's directions would be. But as could be clearly seen in the numbers of 2024, the U.S. companies have always been a very major source of investment when it comes to Hong Kong, because in the end, American companies are very pragmatic as well as very practical.
Meanwhile, the promotion office also noted that they are currently on track to meet their target of introducing 1,130 firms between 2023 and 2025. Evelyn Bai, Cable News.